Tangirala at Tata Trust. Yeah, of course.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Uma.
Hi. I think we'll go live in just I think half a minute or so. Chetan, can you give us a cue when we are ready to go live?
Yes, ma'am. We are live now.
Okay. Okay. So welcome everybody. We are very happy to start the session on building women-led micro enterprises for sustainable livelihoods. We have a very eminent lineup of speakers here, and I would really want to welcome all our speakers and our moderator today. So we have Dr. Rashmi Singh, Special Secretary and Director, Department of Women and Child Development, Government of NCT Delhi. Mr. Vineet Rai, Founder, Aavishkaar. Ms. Mridula Tangirala, Head Tourism and Livelihood Programs in South Zone, Tata Trust. Mr. Krishnagopal GV, Group Chief Executive Officer of Access Livelihoods Group. Our expert moderator today is Ms. Naghma Mulla, CEO of the EdelGive Foundation. And we also have with us the Greater 50 co-chair, Ms. Harjinder Kaur Talwar, and MD and CEO of Comvision here to introduce and invite the panel. So Harjinder ji, over to you for your welcome remarks.
Thank you, Uma. Namaskar, everyone. Welcome all of you to this session. It's a very important session. A warm welcome, especially to Rashmi Singh. Welcome. We know each other since a long time. We are all looking forward to have meaningful exchange on thoughts on a very important subject, that is building women-led enterprise for sustainable livelihoods, the need of the hour. My special regards once again to you, Dr. Rashmi Singh. We thank you for giving your consent to the proposed partnership with your department to initiate a pilot project. The project will aim to impact 500 women within a year, and we definitely are looking at bigger numbers in the times to come. This will be done under the aegis of Greater 50 mission. We hope to deliver our best to make an impact on the lives of women by building their capacity for better livelihood options. Women-led micro-enterprises are the powerhouse to increase income in the face of increasing unemployment. Micro-enterprises are the engines of job growth and can boost job creation while fueling sustainable economic development. There are an estimated 13.5 million to 15.7 million women-owned and controlled enterprises. They are creating direct employment for 22 million to 27 million people in India. And India is home to thousands of micro-enterprises clustered, as well as millions of distributed entrepreneurs who can become job creators. Women entrepreneurship is largely skewed towards smaller size firms, as almost 98% of women-owned businesses are micro-enterprises. Fostering of such enterprises is the key to addressing India's employment challenge, particularly when we talk about socio-economic empowerment of women from vulnerable communities or difficult circumstances which they face. With the decline in the potential to create jobs in the agriculture and large industry on the decline with rapid mechanization, skewed labor capital ratio, mass migrations to urban pockets, the result is often illiterate and unskilled women, and the young girls are left behind. They descend into extreme poverty and get socio-economically exploited. Unfortunately, the coronavirus outbreak has created further uncertainties. The businesses have started evaluating their revival and continuity plans, and the future business approach may be very different from the past. However, the underlying factor remains that it is very important to unleash the untapped potential of women-led micro-enterprises and help them grow. I hope today's session will be able to assess possible solutions to strengthen women-led micro-enterprises. I also would like to tell you, Dr. Rashmi Singh, that we had done, and I was talking yesterday to Sidvi MD on this. we had done in 2019 a survey where we collected data of some 2,000 women, though it was a small data, it was a pilot, but the data was very relevant. These women were all nano enterprises who had the will to move further, were doing something small. And when we spoke to them, they were willing to go to any extent to set up a small enterprise. Then we started doing their survey and asked them, what is it that you need to move one step up? So that data can be taken as a pilot or as a basis for which we can further probably explore this and make sure that these women who are at nano level can be taken at next level. Let me also tell you that I'm now as Vice President of FICCI CMSME and also sitting in National Board of MSME, Ministry of MSME. So we for sure are looking at women powerhouse, which is there and which must be tapped. We were having a interaction with women ambassadors yesterday, 5 women ambassadors in our country. And one thing which one of them said, which was Finland, which is doing extremely well in gender parity and equality, is that how can we allow 50% of our population sit idle? So therefore, it is a government mandate that none of them will sit idle and they have to work. So that's the kind of mandate we are requesting government to be having here, that how can we allow 50% of the population, whether they are at nano or at micro or at small level, to sit idle. They can be a contributor to India's GDP, and that's what we are aiming at. With this, I hand over to the panelist here, to the moderator, and I once again welcome you all into this very important session, which is so pertinent today. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you, Harjinder ji. Thank you so much. Over to you, Naghma, to begin the session.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very, very important conversation. Thank you very much for setting the context so well. And quickly to set the context of what we are going to speak about after Mr. Harjinder Kaur has already done a very good job. We are trying to deliberate on the issue and the whole matter of building women-led micro enterprises for sustainable livelihoods. We have a fantastic panel today led by Dr. Rashmi Singh, who is Special Secretary cum Director of Department of Women and Child Development, and Mr. Vineet Rai, who's founder of Aavishkaar, Ms. Mridula Tangirala, Head of Tourism and Livelihoods Program, Tata Trust, and Mr. GV Krishnagopal, who is Chief Executive of Access Livelihoods Group. As we deliberate on this very important topic, we all have a recognition, we all have realized for a while now that economic gains associated with increased participation of women in the workforce are multifold, and there can be a strong growth driver to boost the economy. Over years, it's been discussed and recognized that the economic upliftment of women is crucial to create a more gender equitable nation. Multiple evidences have been discovered, multiple data points have been spoken about, multiple tools of economic empowerment of women have also been spoken about. But even after that, the participation of women-owned enterprises is still very muted. In fact, according to a survey conducted by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, we have realized that encouraging entrepreneurship amongst women could create over 30 million women-owned enterprises, which could not only bring transformational changes in their own lives, but will also boost the country's economy by generating more livelihoods opportunities. With that, when we in EdelGive looked at, what could be, some of the things that have worked or not worked, what we found, and again, what is something that many people recognize, is that there are many yojnas, many positive steps that have already been taken by the government over years to make sure that micro enterprises from women is encouraged. With that context, I would like to ask my first question to Dr. Rashmi Singh ji, with basically starting from the viewpoint that skilling and upskilling have been advocated as means to further livelihoods, both by the central as well as the state government of Delhi. What has been your experience on working on projects around the same? Because we've got a view from the other side, but you as working and being one of the strongest enablers of this system, what is your view on the same?
Oh, thank you, and congratulations to FICCI for having initiated this discourse and also partnering with us on this, beyond the discourse to actual action. So that is something which I would like to talk about, in terms of the action which, enables our policy also to reflect on, where we are heading, whether we are heading the right way. And we do feel that as far as skilling and upskilling is concerned, ultimately, like, women have to see the opportunity of building it into a monetized economy, into a market economy.
Correct.
Yeah, into a, so it cannot end with just skilling and upskilling. Now, having said that, it is important to create, an entire chain, a value chain, which looks at, training, skilling not only in terms of technical skill, but also in terms of overall skill as a package. Yeah, communication, soft skill, digital skill, financial skills, how to meet, keep the, say, the accounting skills, So it's not just access to bank that I've opened my account, but also simple things like, how do I manage my account? So we do realize that, a very, very holistic approach is needed first to this entire thing about how do you prepare the, the potential women entrepreneurs, who probably have basic know-how of, maybe just like knitting a nice sweater, maybe just creating beautiful embroideries sitting at home. But what they lack is actually, having the capacity to, bring it into the form of a monetized, economic, remunerative, gainful livelihood for themselves and for many others who, if they are a part of the value chain, can gain in the process. Because each woman who becomes an entrepreneur, does have the potential to actually impact many others down the value chain. Now, having said that, I also feel that, Harjinder, in the opening remarks, when, you talk about the women actually not being able to contribute to the GDP, or lesser women, counting in the, say, their contribution to the GDP, it brings me to certain policy, paradigms also, because we are looking at two levels. We are looking at like the policy side, and we are looking at, environment where women can actually grow, grow as entrepreneurs, right? And when I look at the policy side, I also look at the fact that many women who may not actually be sitting idle, who may actually be contributing a lot, but yet, the fact that somewhere they are not being able to, count their contributions into the GDP is something which we need to, you spoke about, like, say, Finland. I'm aware of the fact that in the Scandinavian countries, there are like, this concept of satellite economy. We're actually, putting those contributions which are not getting monetized, to count in the GDP. So starting with these kind of like, certain policies where women's work counts. So when women work is there, but it is not counted in the work participation, then what happens that you do not, they probably miss out on many of the policy support, which many of the home-based works are actually entitled to get. Now, many women that we are talking about, in the informal sector especially, they are doing home-based work. Why? Because they cannot afford to, like, take up on rent, any kind of like, formal, enterprise, and employ, people on a full-time basis. At the same time, I'm aware of the fact that even in the home-based work, there's a chain working. So when we look at skilling and upskilling, and while we are at some of the experiments, while I've been at the helm, even with the, Government of India, Ministry of Women and Child, or like, yeah, you know, say states like Andaman and Nicobar. I've traveled in the islands to see that there are nascent skills, you know, say women, you know, just making jewelry out of coconut, raw coconut, lying in umpteen abundance all over. There are tourists going there, but what they needed was, you know, how do you make it out into a story of from rags to riches? So it needed, you know, us to, when I was there, like, you know, maybe just 500 women identified across different islands, you know, called to Port Blair, 3 months of training, skilling into marketing skills. So the marketing skills is what we need to emphasize upon. The policy support, which needs to be factored into, you know, into using these skills into, you know, say promoting them through the e-commerce. You know, we have tried to come up with a design promoting that, you know, into a form of a brand called Veera brand. Absolutely. Women empowerment, and like, you know, I mean, it's kind of a rehabilitation for those, you know, the last mile, so to say, you know, women who are working, you know, but, you know, where does the product reach the market? So hand-holding support. And we have also come up with a model in which, you know, they are like, yeah, the concept of a Mahila Mart. Yeah, so that, you know, I would encourage each one of you to actually come to a Mahila Mart, you know, next to the Tihar jail. You know, it is actually called the, like, you know, Mahila Mart Veera brand. You know, and we are happy that many of the partners who are coming forward. You know, now FICCI is also joining, ICI's foundation is there, you know, say CCC, Triple C is there. So, you know, so these are the kind of value additions that as a collaboration, you know, between the corporate, industry, banks, you know, and the women's group that we represent. You know, when I say women and child, we represent because we are working closest to those women who need this kind of a support. So I hope, like, for a starting point, I would like end over here, but, you know, happy to take more questions later. Thank you.
No, but I just absolutely appreciate the way you've linked it, Dr. Singh ji, because it's so important to recognize that it is not just about skilling, upskilling, but there's a lot that goes into ensuring that something that a woman is good and confident about can actually be brought to the table, right? Starting from being counted. I think being counted, being visibilized, that work being seen is very, very important. So you made some very, very brilliant points. And we'll hold on to that thought, move to Vineet right now, because I'd like to bring that lens of microfinance. Microfinance plays a very important role in this whole upscaling of business enterprises. From your perspective, how significant has it been doing in the, you know, for women-led enterprises in the global South, especially in India? Has it been doing what the potential is?
Well, Naghma, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I was listening to Dr. Singh and appreciate all the complications or challenges she brought about that one needs to deal with if you're an individual entrepreneur, especially a micro entrepreneur. And I think it's important for us to understand that if we have to realize the potential of women, especially those who are coming from the lower strata, while making an individual micro entrepreneur is a great idea, but you are expecting that women to actually have design skills, marketing skills, stitching skills, finance, accounting skills, which even after doing probably a PhD, most men and women will struggle to actually have capability to do all that. That's why when you go into large institutions, we have somebody responsible for sales, somebody for marketing. So I think what I actually just wanted to emphasize is individuals running their own micro enterprise is a great idea, but it is an extremely complex and a very challenging process. And so those who are successful, and amazingly, and I have always held so I started looking at microfinance when India's total outstanding in microfinance was 100 crores. All India put together was 100 crores. And I made my first investment in 2005. And just to give you an idea, when I made my first investment, India's total microfinance outstanding was 500 crores. Today, it is roughly 3 lakh crores. We have gone from 100 crores, and I'm not talking about a very long time. I look old, but I'm not that old. So I'm talking about just 20 years back. So if you take this 20 years into account, we have gone from 100 crores to 3 lakh crores, $45 billion roughly, give and take. But interestingly, the number of women and the number of institutions who have come up with who are actually nurturing these women are roughly, so let's assume for a minute 50 to 100 odd institutions who are doing microfinance in one way or the other. There could be banks, there could be NBFCs, there could be microfinance institutions as non-banking finance companies, there could be small finance bank. All these people together, something which was considered as a very small time activity, no bank ever believed in. So what's proven in the last 20 years is that women are great borrowers. And I think there is no doubt, and I think nobody will challenge you, that women are actually better borrowers than men. This has been proven. Now, why are they better borrowers? That actually remains a question mark. Is it because they are better entrepreneurs? Or is it because they have a higher sense of responsibility towards the money they have taken? I think these are two different questions, and a lot of people assume that they are better entrepreneurs, but my belief is they have a much higher sense of responsibility. So therefore, they have been returning that money, and therefore they are seeing
responsibility,
a much better credit risk. So the second part of the question, are they better entrepreneurs, continue to remain a question mark as far as I am concerned in my mind. And that is where the second part of the story starts. So if they are actually so responsible and they are such higher ownership of their capital that despite failures, despite limited skills and ability, they have been able to return 3 lakh crores year on year, why is it that you are not investing in creating medium-sized entrepreneurs, large entrepreneurs, of more of them? That's really the big question. And I think that actually boils down to a systemic way in which you actually look at investing. And some of this stereotype is right now being challenged as India is going through a fairly significant opportunity. In some sort of, we are seeing a nebula of opportunity. The opportunities are coming up from all directions. Still, women are doing it. And I'll actually go back to microfinance institutions. So hundreds of millions of women are actually the borrower of microfinance institutions. Make a guess how many employees of microfinance institution are women. And then make a guess how many of those 100 institutions that are microfinance institution whose founder is a woman. And you will actually see a very interesting hierarchy emerging. Let me tell you the microfinance institution that we run, Arohan. We have 2.2 million women. This institution was founded by a male. We actually bought it over. I at least have a co-founder who is a woman. My wife is a co-founder who funded me actually. So at this point of time, Arohan has at least a woman co-founder. 1 year back, our total women employee were 1%. That means 2.2 million women used to borrow, 99 were male employees, and only 1%. And so our managing director, Manoj Nambiar, took up a personal KPI 1, that I would actually take this to 1 to 10%. And in 1 year, we have gone. So this institution has been around for 13, 14 years, but in 1 year, it went from 1 to 10%. And our next target is to take 25%. Just to give you an idea, we employ 6,500 people. So we have gone 1%, which is roughly 65 people, to roughly 650 people. And we expect to take this to 6,000. Now, these people, when they actually become better managers, etc., may have the incentive to leave and start a microfinance institution. So there is a whole hierarchy of things that we need to consider. Micro entrepreneurship is important, but we are actually putting too much onus on an individual women entrepreneur, semi-skilled, less skilled, to actually be what you call a perfect all-rounder. And that is a really challenging activity. And so if they have delivered what they have delivered, which is returned 3 lakh crores for many decades now, there is an exceptional potential there. And we should collectively think about harnessing potential for creating more value.
Yeah, and you've been consistently highlighting this, Vineet, in all possible ways. And I've heard you speak about this again and again, that the onus is not just on an individual, but the onus is on a system that is refusing to acknowledge the credibility and the potential of what that individual is bringing on the table. And so it falls on a lot of us.
If you connect to what Dr. Rashmi Singh said and what I'm saying, we are actually saying the same thing. Basically, institutional infrastructure to allow women to thrive as entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurship. And again, so even if you're a micro entrepreneur, and I'll give you a very good example. I don't know if you have heard of Rang Sutra. I was an investor in Rang Sutra, which is actually then connected with Fab India. But when Shumita came to us, she was running a very small 23 lakh rupee turnover enterprise, and she was running it as a not-for-profit. And I asked her one question, can you become for-profit? And she said, no, I don't want to be for-profit, because why structure is important. And I said, what is your biggest challenge? She says, every day, hundreds of women come and knock on my door and they want to become part of Urmul at that time. And she had just come up with the name Rangsutra. And we gave 25 lakh rupees and she converted all the women artisans into owner of that company. I think today 8,000 odd women actually own that company and they're doing turnover in excess of 20 crores. So now what you've done, you have created an institution with 8,000 women shareholders who actually produce and sell 20 crores worth. And these women are the poorest of poor women on the border of India and Pakistan, living in extreme penury, but they have now become rich shareholders, entrepreneurs. And I think therefore need for structural innovation if we really
is very high. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. We'll move on with this is the right time to really move on to Mridula, and who has a very deep insight on how the Tata Trust have been working in the area of ecotourism. And there is this brilliant tourism on livelihood portfolio in the South Zone that encompasses about 9 out of 101 aspirational districts that Niti Aayog has also highlighted. Coming from that nuance, Mridula, how have you addressed the regional challenges and nuances that bring forward the livelihood opportunities for people, and especially women in that area?
Thank you, Naghma. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, FICCI, and pleasure to be amongst such stellar co-panelists. When I was listening to Rashmi ji and you, Naghma, I remembered a joke I often used to tell, especially early on in my career, saying, behind every successful man is a woman, and behind every successful woman is an army of women. You have people, so you've women in the family, or people who are in roles who free you up from so many duties we all have, like home care, child support, elderly care, this and the other.
Absolutely.
And that's, so you need an ecosystem to thrive. And entrepreneurs also need an ecosystem, whether you're in Silicon Valley or you are in the remotest part of rural India. And when I was thinking about it, actually entrepreneurship has been a byproduct, because we actually began with focusing on every woman in a village. So the whole approach is to make self-help groups, can be 10, 15, 20 women together who start lending amongst themselves, just like microfinance movement did. And once you have collectivized them, there start emerging automatically the opportunities for entrepreneurs to come in and fill in the gaps in the value chain. So you have, who's a typical person that we're working with? Often she is a grandmother, because the youngsters are right. She's a grandmother. She may be looking after grandkids. She's looking after the home. She's a farmer. There's a huge feminization of farming happening. She's looking after her cows, buffaloes, goats, poultry, whatever else. And apart from all of that, she then finds time to also be an entrepreneur. So when there's so many women coming together, and this whole thing of, like you also talked about, being counted, being visible. Those things happen when they come together and a self-help group happens, and then out of 10 self-help groups, one village organization happens, and out of 10 village organization, a federation happens. And then when those shareholders create a federation, you have your value chain starts getting formalized, and these entrepreneurs then automatically come up. You are looking after, you are doing dairy, now you need good feed, now you need somebody to build that thing. You are a farmer, lots of these women are farmers, they need good seedlings. So that's where an entrepreneur comes in. Sapling, they create saplings. Or you're doing fisheries, that's where somebody is rearing fishlings. And once you have the produce, then you need to connect the market end. So that whole self-help group becomes that ecosystem which starts supporting from the demand as well as supply end. So like Rashmi ji rightly said, marketing is the first thing we should be thinking about it. And that's how, and then it becomes easier to connect, they start finding solutions for themselves, and then they start linking with whether it's credit, whether it's tie up with other experts for skills and so on. And bringing this learning to tourism, I spent a lot of time with Taj Group as well. So I had seen the business side of it, and when I crossed over to the other side and in the development sector, and I realized the same thing that you were saying, that you cannot really expect one entrepreneur to do everything from A to Z. And that's what most of our policies have the same problem. So we have homestay policy. So you expecting that homestay owner to first design their house and then cook and then clean and then market and then take the booking and go on social media and do all of that. It just cannot. You cannot scale, and it's not fair to expect one person. So our approach is to create a community-based tourism where everybody does things as per their ability, their time. Time, I realized, was most important. So the whole way we've conceptualized tourism is around how much time typically we're seeing these women have. They may only have 2 hours in a day. They will not be able to run a business which requires them to be available 24/7. So the whole offering and the way we accept customers, especially initially, is around that. So that's how we've approached it, and it's it helps, and it then scales up fairly quickly. Once you've done all the work for about a year and a half, working with all the companies. And just very quickly to cover a second question about aspirational district, we recently did an exercise of saying, okay, which are the districts where we need to be present? And it was a very interesting exercise of saying 700 plus districts, where should we be? And we created sort of a 2 X and Y axis. On one, we said, okay, what are the stress factor in a district? And it was a similar exercise to what aspirational district scoring also does, but we added other factors. And the other was enablement in terms of what are these things exist. And then we took the spot that we thought nobody else was servicing. And that's how we then, so areas that had more natural resource distress, because now climate change and its impact is being felt in marginal communities and remote communities and on women much more than anywhere else. So we chose such areas, and therefore, we've now focusing on about 170 odd kind of districts. So that exercise itself also taught us a lot.
Must have, definitely. I'm sure that's fascinating. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd come to Mr. Krishnagopal and really address the whole. There's a very unique way in which you and ALC has been customizing approaches wherever necessary while working across marginalized communities in multiple states. And I'd like to just hear from you on how important is this customized environment specific approach working specifically to the empowering of women across states, because it's not an easy job. There's a lot to map, to look and work for. So how have you gone about it, and how well is it working for you?
Thanks, Naghma. I think my co-panelists have actually clearly set the agenda. Dr. Rashmi had said that, set the facts about what are the issues, and Vineet had left. His last word was, we need to develop an institutional architecture to really work with women entrepreneurs. And Mridula has actually laid out the entire architecture. She talked about SSGs, how they get aggregated and how do they interact with markets and all those things. So just to set a context, I exactly come from the space where I have got the opportunity to work with 65,000 women producers who are primarily into farming and weaving sectors, organize them into producer companies. And today, all of them collectively, own a brand. And this brand is able to sell around 145 crores. So in the markets, so these brands are very well-known setup, and that's the business that I've been doing for last 2 decades, working with the women. Wow. So with that as a context, what is the customization that is required at the ground? So when we talk about customization, I would say that any work has two components. One is core and the other is the auxiliary. So the core remains constant. And what is the core that remains constant is what Vineet and Mridula had emphasized, which is about institutional architecture. And there we are very clear that women who have been invisible all these years, who have not been recognized as a farmer, who is not recognized as a weaver. Whenever you look at a TV commercial or any ad or a government ad, you will see that a farmer is always a male or sitting on a tractor, right? You never see a woman being recognized.
Yeah,
And so the first core part of it is that visibility to and acknowledgement by everybody that women are not sleeping around. They're actually doing wonderful contribution towards the economy. So that is a core part. Then giving it an institutional architecture where women are treated as entrepreneurs and shareholders of companies which they manage, and where they create a space in the market where brands which they own really directly connect to the consumers, right? So the producers today, technological solutions, is possible that the women can directly connect to the consumers in the urban areas and establish their visibility and brand in true sense, which means that the value that is getting aggregated from the consumer actually goes back to the woman producer. If you look at a traditional model, normally in farming sector and weaving sector, the weaver or the farmer, who is a woman, basically realizes around 18 to 20% of the consumer rupee. But in a model which we are talking about, where a producer company is interfacing with the markets directly with the consumer, 80% of the consumer rupee goes back to the weaver or the woman. And this is the way to multiply incomes and triple up or double up the incomes of the women and make them more visible and clearly they are this one. In 75 years, I think probably we only know of Seva and probably Lichat Papad, right? And these are the two brands which represent the interest of women, that too from the bottom of the pyramid. So the idea that we should be working on at the core level is to create a unified brand at the national level and create space for these small producers to aggregate, negotiate, and earn substantially from the markets. So that's the core part. The auxiliary part obviously is going to keep changing according to the socio-economic and political situation in the ground. So one simple example, when we work with women in Gondia, which is a tribal district in Maharashtra, very near to Gadchiroli, we obviously work with a produce which is completely different because it's an area where very high rainfall is there and you only cultivate paddy, the two of coarse varieties. And that's the principal crop. So you have to add income, then you have to add poultry or livestock or some of these into this particular, integrate into it. And you also have to look at possibility of integrating one of the other non-farm activities where you do add value to in terms of the produce that is coming out, both in terms of agriculture produce as well as poultry produce and all, where you can interact with markets with a powerful system. So a supply chain disruption where producers are directly connected to the consumers, a single brand which integrates them, and an aggregation of this produce is what is critical, where technology has to be used as a very essential tool, because even till date, even though handlooms and agriculture is the largest you don't have a single supply chain solution where you can track agriculture produce from the farm and farmer level to directly to the consumer, right? Where you can give traceable nutrition. So these are the areas where you have to customize as per the various locations, and the crops will vary, the designs will vary, the patterns will vary, techniques will vary of what the weavers are trying to do, and everybody is going to do this one. So that's the two parts: the customizable part, which has to be the auxiliary part, and the core part, which remains constant.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you very much. Very valuable insight, and I'd like to bring it back to Dr. Rashmi Singh, who's just been very patient through this conversation. But ma'am, when we spoke, you laid out the whole value chain and what needed to be enabled and triggered for a woman entrepreneur, and I want to bring it back to the conversation of digital technology as a very strong medium of advancement and the fact that there is so much more that can be done with it. In fact, ICT is being leveraged as a tool under Delhi's mission convergence. And as a seasoned bureaucrat, how important have the digital tools become for this generation of livelihood earners, especially for women? And so while we say digital, we also have a way of broadening it across. So what do you see as the perils of where this is going, and the advantages of really looking at digital technology as a very strong enabler for this ecosystem?
Oh, thank you. And, let me start with the peril first. Yeah, because there are much more enablers. I feel that the digital tool, is like really important enabler today for women, and which is, kind of equalize the access and, reduce the access barriers, I'd say. Yeah, but in terms of, well, the perils, you might say, I do hear of women saying that, well, like it's become like 24 hours an expectation for them to be on work, digitally connected, online, and at the same time, the entire care burden is still on the women.
Not reducing.
Many of them, the gender roles, the differentials, like not being like, responded to sensitively enough to give them that space, that space to become even more creative than they are. So, because we are definitely talking about, especially like, marketing, production, design. So all these things which bring one word to me is creativity, space. So, that is, some kind of a challenge even today, that, well, when we do not recognize the women's work even at home, whereas when I say digital access, it's mostly something, which is actually enabling freedom for a woman to be able to work at home, to be able to link up with a bigger market, with a better market, with a better pricing structure, having better design access, so it is an instrument to her to network better, to connect better, to be more informed, and to, inform others about what she's doing.
Yeah.
So I think many of the access barrier, which otherwise you would have thought about, for a woman entrepreneur. That is somehow, for me, that gets like through the use of digital access, today, those access barriers, which is today leading her to like, looking at opportunities for online marketing, right? I mean, also upgrading her skills. Upgrading her skills to all kind of like online courses, short courses being offered online through like some of best business colleges, best universities. So that's there, with entrepreneurs down the chain, including some NGOs, some foundations who would actually do something, for women who would not normally be able to access things, online in a typical traditional, like, method of imparting education. Because I do feel some of the foundations have partnered with us. So they actually went through a different kind of training program altogether. It was done digitally, in the quiz form. It was done, with case studies. It was done through like films being shown. So all that, like, boosts the confidence of like women to look at like both individual as also the collective enterprise that the self-help group model has been talked about, say the Lijat Papad story or the other successful stories. To seeing is believing. Looking at role models, being able to talk to mentors. So that mentor-mentee relationship. Normally the mentors would not have the time otherwise to get connected, but digitally they would get connected. So I think, this is like open a whole lot of new opportunities for women. For both individual and, the collective, women collective. And this network of like community of practitioners is something which I think is really empowering. Because we did talk about like, women being helped by other women. So the women collective, like once they see that there are others who are connected, like, their peer group, otherwise like, mentors, many of the successful women here, say foundations, in FICCI, Flow. I've heard that they are also trying to mentor, right? So that is like another thing which, and, of course, like some of the challenges are the digital connect and the hardware, the software, the connect to everyone, which is not at the same level. You look at like, in the access barrier to the digital technology is still there. We cannot say that it's at the uniform level. So ideally we would want that every gram panchayat, the same bandwidth of connectivity is there in every village. We are talking about the self-help group, which is very empowering under, one of the government programs called the NRLM, the National Rural Livelihood Mission. Where like I think Mridula ji also talked about the VO model, and so whole of opportunities are there, but at times the access barrier, even to the digital technology, that is something which when we are trying to promote, simple things like the smartphones with everyone, things like a small tab or a digital kiosk, in every village, with high speed, connectivity, internet. So those things can maybe, can be played, strengthened more. And I think the flexibility, the flexi timing and all, which is like good in a way that while you are like, rather than just wishing away, it is a reality. Look, the care work and all, which is, with the mother, taking care of the child. I do wish that the father would be equally responsive. Nevertheless, even if the mother has to be more responsive, which she is, so the flexi time and all, through the access digital technology. So, that's something which is very positive. And I think during COVID, more and more, you see, we have tried to build this digital connect. Because on our part, like say in Delhi, I've seen that all our Anganwadi workers are connected, like 10,000 of them. The Saheli Samanvay Kendra, where we have set up these, hub models, where we encouraging local incubation centers, for women to come and like, use the access points over there, to get better connected to the others. So I think there are like, good practices which are evolving. And, I'm sure we can reduce the barriers, more and more in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very, very insightful. And moving from digital technology access as well as barriers, Vineet, you've very kindly taken us through the journey, the incredible journey of the whole micro finance space in India over the last 2 decades. Social enterprises and the way they have changed character from the early days to now. How and Aavishkaar Capital has worked very closely. What are some of the remarkable changes that you see, and what could be some of the big misses that we may have had? What would you have to say about that?
I think the word social has many connotations. You are a social entrepreneur. Right? It's a for-profit, so I actually go for a slightly simple version: for-profit, not for profit. I have for all my life spent since 2000. I have already been focused on for-profit, and I call it the turn of century impact. I started becoming whatever you call it, an impact investor at this side of the century. Before that, it was not for profit. So whatever social was, it was considered not for profit. The most important thing that I have learned in my 20-year of journey of trying to be an investor, supporter, entrepreneur myself, and having done 50, 60 odd companies, some of them who have scaled to 5,000-7,000 crores, some who have actually scaled to 5 crores, 10 crores after 20 years also. That the most important thing is not necessarily the individual founder, etc. It is actually the market that you're trying to choose. So when you are looking at women and you are just think about for a minute, just think about building markets that actually serve the need of the women. So just see them as buyers, and you can build very large enterprises. It's not, the women may not be the entrepreneur, women may not actually be the worker in that, but you can actually serve. Microfinance is a great example where women is the borrower and their credibility is built the entire 3 lakh crore system. So how to actually transfer and create value for women in this whole process, because the empowerment, and again, when we start looking at, so that the problem with for-profit space is you can actually solve one problem with that. It unfortunately cannot solve 6, 7 problems. It cannot solve hierarchy. It can't give you an equal footing. It cannot actually solve other issues. It cannot create empowerment. What it can create is it can actually solve a certain problem in the process, create livelihoods, or solve or probably create many significant number of jobs. So from a structural perspective, I was listening to Krishnagopal as well. The way to do it is people at the base level, those who are working, the people, women we are talking about, the micro entrepreneurs, can they be actually structurally brought into creation of an entrepreneur so that they are only solving one problem? Like their focus is only on stitching. Now, large corporates have done that. Large corporates have actually created very large factories where tens of thousands of women will sit and they will stitch, and they will get a very fixed salary. Now, the key question is, what is the difference between a micro entrepreneur? While you are taking the risk of uncertainty, you can also earn more or less depending on what your skill is. Now, when you become a job doer, while there is a lot of job creation happening, but you are only getting a small percentage of all the value that you're creating. And so I think I'll take you back to the Rang Sutra example, or probably what Krishnagopal is also trying to do, which is what producer companies do. Unfortunately, producer companies also have an inherent flaw because it works on suffrage. So the bigger user would actually take more advantage, not more risky. The people who are taking more risk will not take advantage. Plus, it's to bring money there. So ultimately, there is a need for capital. There is a need for an idea. There is a need for an idea that can actually empower and create women entrepreneurs. And all this has to come together. So I'll tell you what we have been trying to do. So all the global DFIs, the CDCs, the IFCs, the KFWs, the DEGs, the FMOs, they have come together and come up with a thought process called 2X challenge. And the 2X challenge, the idea is very simple. You can be at 2X you can be at 2X, which means these guys, they will give you money. When they are investing in you, they will verify whether your policies and systems are attuned towards encouraging women entrepreneurship. That's actually one way to do it. And they have something called 2X flagship, where you have to take more onerous voluntary conditions to create women-led, women-focused entrepreneurship. And so Aavishkaar probably is the first fund in Asia. We just yesterday received confirmation that we qualify for 2X flagship. This will be first in Asia, where we'll actually be taking voluntarily significant amount of obligations to encourage women-led, women-founded, women where women have significant ownership or women actually have significant jobs, those kinds of enterprises. Now, this is actually a intervention. You are going really up so that you are taking the responsibility. Now, you question, Vineet, what will happen in case you don't meet the criteria? Reputational loss. So 5 years down the line, they can actually withdraw this for non-performance. Reputational loss, but no financial loss as far as we are concerned. What is really important, and the reason I'm actually mentioning all this, is that there are many different ways to actually bring capital to women
in this
ecosystem creation, which right now talking only for micro entrepreneur. But if you don't build the entire, if we only part of the pyramid, we will continue to have this debate 3 decades down the line also, with the challenges much. And I think really my worry, in last 20 years, I've seen we have spent a lot of time debating the obvious, ignoring the learnings that we've got over the last 20 years. So we keep repeating mistakes, expecting a different answer, and Einstein defined us as madness. So we are
thank you. Yes, I really love the examples and anecdotes, and also the way forward that you've put out there. And I'm very, very cognizant that we've got about 4 and maybe 5 minutes left, but I cannot let this opportunity to go back to Mridula and really say that of all the great things that have been done under the Tourism and Livelihoods program and other work in Tata Trust, what are some of the key wins or some of the positive impacts that have been, have been had on tribal communities, especially women in that area. And I just request you to be a little, quick, because I don't want to again miss Krishnagopal before we say bye.
Sure. Well, we're working with about I think 6 million women, 6 million people, out of which they connect through to them through 1.2 million women that we work with. And of late we have been incubating these federations, just like was being shared by Krishnagopal SG as well. And some of those have scaled up fairly fast, very quickly, giving crores of turnover. So yeah, we've had we present in 22 states, and I think work with about 30,000 federations and VO and other community institutions. So yes, it takes time, but once it starts sort of spinning, it spins at a fast pace.
Yeah. And it's so nice to have that happen, right? Because after all the crazy efforts that have gone, to be able to see that work out is so good. And with that, coming to Krishnagopal, who will have the final word really in this whole conversation, and coming down to, you spoke so much about the customization approach also, but how important is it for us to have fluid models that enable this customization when it comes to institutional interventions, or something that everyone actually has alluded to? I mean, your final word on that before, I pass it on to Uma will be really cool.
Yeah, so before I answer that part of the question, I think I'll simplify Mridula's task. We are also one of the groups which have been supported openly by Tata Trust, right? So whatever we are doing with the women is what Tata Trust has enabled us to do it.
Beautiful.
So answering your question, and what is it that has to really be done to help the women to be large part of this? First thing is that we have I think it's time that the ecosystem start recognizing women for their native wisdom, right? We need to accept the reality that women today, on an average in rural areas and in tribal areas, are 6th standard fail or 7th standard fail. They are called neoliterate, right? But they carry a lot of native wisdom, right? That wisdom is coming through the struggle that they do to do the survival, to subsist, and to probably earn a decent living and meet the aspirations. And over and above, as Dr. Rashmi Singh has said, that there are reproductive functions and care functions which the women are primarily responsible for this entire this one. So, so what we have done to support this kind of women is that while and it has not to be only in the word, but it has to be in the practice. So how do we do it? So first thing is that when we talk about working with women, we usually talk about skill development, and as Vineet had rightly pointed out, management is learned over PhDs and with a lot of investment like 15 lakhs, 16 lakhs. But when you want to talk about skill development for women, we will invest 5,000 rupees unit cost. That's the unit cost. I will invest 5,000 rupees, I will invest 3,000 rupees. So we have changed and we say we have to make significant investments. So we created a micro MBA, which is a 9-month program. And women are given MBA certificate. You need not be a degree holder to really get managerial qualities. You can actually create a micro. So that's first part of the reimagination. Second part of the reimagination is voice-over based, India Stack based financial inclusion solution. It's possible today with India Stack that you can actually directly pass on a loan through e-contracts and all these kind of solutions. And finally, I would want to emphasize that we need to create micro incubation centers, which Dr. Rashmi Singh has also talked about. Micro incubation centers should be acting as spokes with a central hub, which is digitally enabled, and women being provided with early finance that is required, startup finance, so that women in the rural
so that it works out
further.
So,
and then
that is
continue to support for next 3-4 years. You don't support a small incubation program and leave it at that level. So then
absolutely
we see a different world for the women. I think what the greater 50 is aspiring will be there. It's not a big rocket science.
Thank you.
To be solved.
No, I love the alignment right from Dr. Rashmi Singh, to Vineet, to Mridula, to Krishnagopal. Everyone has been speaking of enabling the same segment. There is such alignment in thoughts, and they're coming from such different lenses. Thank you so much for a very, very engaging conversation. And it's been a pleasure chatting to all of you. And it's been a pleasure to be here. And with my gratitude, I'd like to pass it back to Uma for her next session.